There are two different worlds in this land. On May 14th every year, this is the world of Israel. We're celebrating independence. This is the Palestinian world. Are protesting. They protested against Israel's independence. Why is that? Richard Brazil is a traitor and a self-fascist. As the Oslo Accords advanced to the second round, Prime Minister was assassinated by a far right. At Tel David, peaceful progress, so that 7 defeat. Conflict, so it can't be stopped. Peace talks took place many years later at the Second David Run Agreement in 2000. It doesn't bring any results. Both sides understand that there will be no peace. The Second Intifada broke out in 2000 with a much higher level of violence than the first time. It ended in February 5th. As a result, about 3,200 Palestinians were killed. The Second Intifada is basically changed the course of the conflict. Israelis no longer believe in peace from Palestine. So instead of thinking about negotiations, they're building fences and guard posts to control the Palestinians. The Palestinians understand that neither negotiation nor violence will solve anything. Although in the year 2005 Israel withdrew the Palestinians, they are still under Israeli control. It's like open-air prisons, while the West Coast is still contested. And think of a country of its own. It's a hopeful thing. And then the conflict goes on. Until now, the Jews have found their homeland. It's even a rich country. The Palestinians are not. And so do these kids. The keys, it will never be used again. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict for decades. It's often attributed to religious issues. Despite the fact, it's mostly about conflict over sovereignty in the same land. It all started over a century ago, this time in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's what we call Israel today. Palestine was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire through the centuries. This is the population of Palestine in 1807-8. Muslims are the majority. Then there's Christianity and Judaism in the minority. Despite the difference in religion, they basically live in peace. But the problem is starting to change when someone else shows up, brother. At the start of the First World War, physical forces begin to seek control of this land. First, an Arab political movement, separation from the Ottoman Empire, to create a unified Arab state, including the Palestinian area. This time, you also need to occupy this area. To the trade routes, getting to India is easy. So in the first market, both the British and the Arabs wanted to overthrow Ottoman. And so, in 1916, the guy you told the Arabs here was, help us against the Ottomans. We will. I support you in the creation of a united Arab country. But just a year later, he promised 7. Currently in Europe, there are more and more Jews participated in the Zionist movement. They say that Judaism is not just a religion. Israel is also a nation, and the Jewish people need a homeland of their own. They've been lost enough. After centuries of oppression, abuse, and deported from many different countries, they believe that a Jewish state, it's the only way to keep them safe. They looked at their early religious history. It's a Jewish state. It existed thousands of years ago in the Middle East. It doesn't matter what the Arabs think. Your brother gave you something called a blanket statement. This statement says, your government, we support the creation of a Jewish nation in Palestine. It is still the territory of the Ottoman Empire. It's in a letter from the Secretary of State, Arthur Buffo, to Lord Lionel Walter. He's a leader of the Jewish community. He's also a close friend of the leader of this movement. This is the contents of the Foreign Affairs Department letter to 11 a year 97. Journalist of Russia. In the name of Your Majesty's government, I'm honored to inform you of the government's approval for the patriotic aspirations of the Jews, which has been submitted and approved by the Cabinet. In this letter, we have 2 points to note. First, the British call the Arabs in Palestine. It's the non-Jewish community in Palestine. Second, this non-Jewish community will be free. Religion and civil rights, but political rights are not mentioned. Palestinians believe that. That's the promise of those who don't own. For those who do not have the right to receive. For the British, they didn't even control this land. 1902, after the end of the First World War, the British control an area called British Mandate of Palestine. The English name is Beauty Mended, and that's when they did their coverage. In the beginning, you allowed Jews to immigrate, and then 10,000 Jews in Europe moved here. 1900 the number of Jews who arrived more than doubled. Compared to 1902, migrations like that helped the national movement. The Jews grew strong. There's a slogan like this: a land without people, for a people without land. Of course, this land is inhabited. And here's the reality. Even though the Jews who came here were much more numerous, 1902 Palestinian Arabs remain in majority. But the Jews keep coming back. Of course, the Palestinians don't like this. The Jews came and began to strip the fertile land from the Palestinians. So the tension escalates. Violence quickly broke out. The Arabs here have revolted against the big British colonists, like the Jews, but they were quickly oppressed by the British. The British even brought some troops. That's more than the number of troops stationed in India, and oppressed the Palestinians. Thousands of Palestinians have been killed. The British at the same time and arming the forces, according to the Jewish patriotism, to put down the uprisings together. But it's getting worse and worse. And to placate the Arabs to the ripe 30 seconds, you've started restricting Jewish immigration. This, that the extremists of Zionism, dissatisfied, they quickly formed militia groups against the British and the Arabs. The violence is even stronger than before. To World War II, after the bloody genocide of the Nazis aimed at the Jews, taking place in the years fashioned to a ripe for 5 in Europe, more and more Jews fled to the area. Mandate of Palestine tour guide. 1900 for 7. Violence between Arabs and Jews continues to escalate. The British, after years of manipulation, both Arabs and Jews, decided to give up and take this issue to the United Nations. The Special Committee of the United Nations proposed to divide this land into 2 countries, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. The city of Jerusalem, it will become an international zone controlled by the United Nations. It's called a 9-partition plan for 7. It's basically going to be a Jewish state and establish independence for the Palestinians from the British. The ultimate goal is to end the violence between the 2 sides that you can't control. Also, according to the British will leave on May 14th, a 9-year 4/8. The Jews were, of course, pleased with this plan, and the Palestinians can't believe what they get. The United Nations has divided up to 56% for the Jews, including the most fertile lands, while the population is less than half. Palestinians see the unplanned. It's the land grab of colonialism. This has been the land of their ancestors for over 1,000 years. The problem isn't just division. It's not fair. To have a country for a state, Israel is newly formed, is not simply go and build your country. You've got to get rid of the people who are there. If they don't go, You have to use force against them. It's like some country. You also have to destroy their villages, erase every trace they left behind. But where they're going, you don't care. That's how Israel does it, to clean the partitions that the United Nations assigns to the Jews. It's called plan. People who have been here for generations to leave their hundreds of villages. They carry the key to the door, though, because they believe this could end soon, and they can go back to their homes. But that never happened. Israel declared its independence on May 14th, year 1948. Many Arab countries have gained independence. Declared war on the young state of Israel, from a 9-for-8 to a 9-for-9. The purpose is nothing else: to create a Palestinian state unified across this entire territory. This obviously means the newly formed state of Israel. You will have to fly color. Surprisingly, that young state of Israel, they were defeated by the Arab siege. They even occupied the western half of Jerusalem, and most leaders. The land was given to Palestine. Israel eventually controlled almost the entire territory, except for the Egyptian-run Garage and the West Bank. It is located on the west bank of the Jordan River. More than 500 villages were destroyed. About 15,000 people were killed. More than 700,000 Palestinians and have to find asylum in surrounding countries like Egypt, Jordan, or Syria. It's a disaster that the Palestinians called Namba. And this is the beginning for 10 years of conflict between Israel and the Arab countries after that. 1906-7, another war reshaped the situation. In the Middle East, the war between Israel and the Arab states broke out. It's known as the Six-Day War. End the war. Israel occupies the Golan Highlands of Syria, West Bank of Jordan and Garage Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. At the same time, Israel controls the entire Palestinian territory, including Jerusalem. It means now they will also control the Palestinians. In 1907-8, the United States brokered the David-Left between Israel and Egypt. According to an agreement made, Israel agrees to return Sinai to Egypt. In return, Egypt would recognize the State of Israel. This led to outrage in the Arab world. In the end, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated. However, this agreement has cooled the tension between Israel and the Arab countries. Arab countries are starting to change their attitude to Israel. However, the Israeli army is still stationed on the west coast. These are Palestinian territories. So, large-scale conflict between Israel and the Arab countries, between Israel and the Palestinians. In the 60s, Palestine Liberation Plo was established. We are fighting for a Palestinian state against Israel. The Plo claims sovereignty over all of Palestine, Saturn before. This means Polo. Israel will have to disappear completely. And so the clashes. The clash between Palo and Israel took place for many years. Finally, the leader of Palo, Yasser Arafat, announces acceptance of partition of Palestine and Israel, but the conflict is on the rise. In that context, a problem arises. Many Israelis have moved to Gaza and the West Bank Palestinian territories. It is controlled by Israel. Some have moved for religious reasons, some because they once occupied land, and some because of the cheap housing, because these areas are subsidized by the Israeli government. Of course, Palestinians don't like this, but there's nothing they can do for the Israelis, protected by Israeli soldiers. It is considered illegal by the international community. Such settlements are on the rise. The Palestinians were forced to leave their land. This leads to the community blocks of the Palestinians. It is also divided. Basically, Israel seeks to divide Palestinian communities. Because that would make the Palestinians, it's harder to create an independent state of your own. When the pain has reached its limit, Whatever comes must come. In 1987, the pain exploded into Intifada for the first time. From 1987 to 19... Intifada in Arabic means revolt. Protests and boycotts broke out. It quickly led to violence. Israel responded quickly with force. Hundreds of Israelis, more than 1,000 Palestinians were killed. Meanwhile, in the garage, a Palestinian extremist formed an organization called Hamas. They claimed that the plow carries from the Hamas compromise. It was created for nothing else, apart from destroying Israel. The Oslo Accords. It will allow the Palestinians to be self-governing in certain areas. However, this agreement quickly met the indignation of extremists from both sides.